Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'd like to use this opportunity to welcome every one of us who have made our time out of our busy schedules to attend the launch of the Lagos Island report. We would like to thank everyone for coming, and we'll be starting in the next couple of minutes, please. All right. Good morning, everyone. I would also like to use this opportunity to welcome all of us once again. This is a wonderful event because it has been one that has been in the pipeline for the better part of 2 years. And despite the COVID-19 challenges and all, we are happy to know that at the end of the day, we are able to publicly launch this report and deliberate on how we can make inclusive planning sustainable, especially when designing recreation, leisure, and tourism spaces in Lagos. I'd like to use the opportunity to welcome everyone to this event. We have with us in the audience Dr. Adun Okukwe. Dr. Adun Okukwe is the Creative Director of the Sahara Center. And we also have Mrs. Olamide Ejo, who is also the Director of the Lagos Urban Development Initiative, LUDI. The Lagos Island project is a collaboration between the Sahara Center and LUDI. And this project sought to see how development plans for recreation, leisure, and tourism can be made more inclusively, such that historical and cultural sites and those public spaces which are used for socio-cultural interactions and engagement are also included in development plans, and that they are not repurposed for other uses, either commercial or residential uses. We also have the members of the panel who are wonderful and experienced representatives of the various sectors which we have invited to deliberate with us on inclusive planning for recreation, leisure, and tourism. We would definitely give out time to recognize the presence of these people and would reel out their bio once the panel session starts. But I would like to welcome Ms. Ajoke Silva to the event. We also have with us Architect Theo Lawson, who is the Chief Warden of Freedom Park, Lagos. We have Alhaji Abdul Latif Muse, who is the Executive Secretary of the Victoria Island and Ikoyi Residents Association. Yes, and we have with us Chuka Ihono. Mr. Chuka, can you hear us very well? Can you also put on your video so we can see you well as well? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chuka. Mr. Chuka He's an architect and he's also very passionate about all things history, architecture, art, and culture in Lagos. You're welcome, sir. Yeah, we also have Dolapo Omidire, who is a real estate research analyst, and he would also be bringing his own experience on the real estate industry and how developers can integrate inclusive planning for recreation, leisure, and tourism spaces when designing residential estates in future development plans. Dolapo, can we also have your video on so we can see you as well? Hi, Dolapo, can you hear us? All right, fantastic. You're welcome. Good morning. So yes, we have all our panelists represented at this event. So I'd like to call the session open by inviting the Creative Director of the Sahara Center, Dr. Adro Kupe, to introduce the Lagos Island Project and what it is all about.
Right. Okay. Good morning, everyone. And first of all, I'll start by saying Happy World Tourism Day, which is today, the 27th of September. And the plan or the theme for today is rethinking tourism. And so why we've decided to have this public launch event today is that when we're rethinking tourism, it's important that we combine perspectives of residents, we combine perspectives of visitors, business people, developers, architects, and creative producers, and see that how does this then show up in how we rethink, how we live, and how we plan our spaces. So welcome. My name is Adun, as Emeka has said, and we have a distinguished list of panelists that we're so honored that they could make the time to come for this event today, and also for our participants. Thank you so much for making the time as well. And so without much ado, we'll just really get started and we'll go through the agenda which you have received. But the idea for the program really, or for the project, really came from some of the work we've been doing and looking at saying that, okay, you know what, we really want to see how we can develop the spaces around us. There's a lot of narrative around the smart Lagos, around resilient Lagos, but cities are for work and play. And how do we start to really think about how do we build cohesive communities, which is what the Sahara Center really is about. How do we ensure that we design more cohesive communities? How do we ensure that the social cultural fabric of our communities are preserved? And also, how do we ensure these are amplified and celebrated? And so that was it. And we invited LUDI, Lagos Urban Development Initiative, Olamide, to be part of this project with us, which they very kindly accepted. And the reason for that, again, is that when you're talking about spaces, when you're talking about communities, it's also important that we think about the urban environment and urban development. And why is this so? And why did we choose Lagos Island? It's because, first of all, Lagos Island has, and if you've read the report, all of this is in the report, but Lagos Island is a very distinct space. It has the history, it has the heritage. It also is a commercial nerve center. And a lot of the plans for Lagos in terms of the cultural and creative industries are centered around the Lagos Island axis. And so the idea was, can we investigate this a bit more? Can we speak to the residents a bit more, just to even understand their own perspectives and what they think about it? And interestingly, they said that we were the first people that had ever come to speak to them to ask them what they thought about it, which was quite interesting in itself, but it also showed the sense of agency and willingness that community members have. And they participated with us throughout the data collection, where we went on different days to speak to business people, residents, and visitors. And also when we had the focus group session at the Goethe Institute, which was then at City Hall, it was really exciting and very encouraging to see how involved that they were, and just that sense of, what, we also want to shape the future of our society. We're concerned about gentrification, we're concerned about the challenges, we're concerned about security, safety, transport, and we want to have a voice that can play into how things are shaped for the future. And all of that conversation and all of that journey, really for us at the Sahara Center, is looking at saying, okay, how can the cultural and creative industries also be part of this change? architects are part of the creative industries, cultural producers, designers, etc. And so how do we also ensure that the development of Lagos and other parts of our country, we have the key players that can play a part? And so again, I'm very honored that different panelists who we invited came, because for us, it's also the sense of, can we hear from the residents associations? Can we hear from the real estate agents? Can we hear from the cultural producers? Can we also hear from the architects? So that is really it in a nutshell. And so I'll get Olamide also to speak. But before that, I'd like to really say a big thank you to Heinrich Böll Foundation, because they were also part of the supporters for this project. And so that really just also showed us that, once we can put our foot forward to start to make change, there will be other people that can join this journey. So we want to just acknowledge their support of the project as well. So thank you so much, and thank you. Olamide, over to you.
Great, thanks, Adam. Thank you so much. And again, thanks to everybody that is joining us today, especially the panel. I think we have such a great group of speakers who are going to give their opinion on what we've been able to achieve and what tourism and urban planning how tourism and urban planning can contribute. Hearing some feedback. Great, so I'm just going to do a quick summary of the project, tell you a little bit about the research goals, as well as the methodology and then the key findings. So the research question that we had was, how can tourism and urban planners create cities that are responsive to the residents' needs for work and play? And there were 3 goals that guided this research question. Understand the perspectives of stakeholders, that's residents, business owners, visitors, on recreation, leisure, and tourism. Explore the spatial structure of recreation, leisure, and tourism in Lagos Island at the neighborhood level, to identify the locations and distinct nodes and precincts dedicated to attracting shopping, businesses, and of course, tourism, but not tourism when you think of, we're going to Venice or whatever to experience the gondolas and so on. But it's more about me as a resident. Where do I go to experience my city? Where do I go to experience culture? How can I relax? How can I rest? Where can I play? Where can I take my children? Of course, also bridge the gap between urban planning and recreation, leisure and tourism, by investigating the relationship between the phenomena to assess how residents and visitors experience Lagos Island. And the methodology, we first had a literature review. Before commencing anything, we had a literature review, which really tried to just let us understand how urban planning and tourism come together globally and then bring it down to a local scale. And we found that actually there's not a lot of academic papers or even great literature that touches on these 2 things, which is urban planning and tourism. Then the research team went out to understand Lagos Island. What's the geographical or spatial context of Lagos Island? What activities happen? What commercial? What touristic? What residential activities happen? And then this was also put together for a survey, which we then put out to business owners, visitors, and residents, looking at their perspectives on recreation, leisure in Lagos Island. And we did 188 surveys. Interviews were also conducted with tour guides and attraction center managers. And we also made sure that we didn't leave out government officials. We did an online survey for government officials and state parastatals to share their own views on tourism in Lagos Island. And then, so that's pretty much the methodology in a nutshell. And so I'm just going to run through the key findings and the recommendations, and then we kind of dig in a little bit from the panelists, who I think will help us expand on these key findings and recommendations. So for the key findings, of course, contribution of leisure to the socioeconomic development of the city usually is overlooked in state development plans. So when we look at urban and regional plans that are done by Lagos State, tourism and leisure kind of get kind of sidelined. Sustainable tourist activity plans are not well driven and need to be driven by provisions for residents themselves as the key stakeholder. So again, I think when we think of tourism, we think of something that is very abstract. We don't think of something that is personal and about our own communities and how do we use our space. So we have to think a little bit different about what tourism is. Authenticity is an issue with tourist destinations, and tourism should not be limited to tourist villages. So again, it's not about taking something that is outside, but something that is within your community. There's a need to preserve historical buildings and put steps in place to prevent the demolition of such buildings in Lagos Island. So we've seen this in a variety of examples with not just Lagos Island, different parts of Lagos, where we've seen buildings being pulled down or even, demolished. Some have even, come to disrepair, but it's about how do we preserve these historical buildings. And then as Lagos Island evolves, important to have a responsible approach to development to avoid the negative impacts of gentrification. And again, this is very important because we've seen this in a variety of different communities, even like Maroko community, which is a VI. We've seen that happen where people come in, new businesses, new residential areas, and unfortunately, the people who lived there before, the history, the culture disappears through the act of gentrification. So how do we do this responsibly? And then 52% of respondents defined recreation, tourism, and leisure in Lagos Island as spending time with friends and family at home or outdoors, playing games, hanging out on the street, eating out at local vendors. So we need to think about, yes, these are really great activities, but how do we now highlight them within the community? How do we make them a cultural experience for people who come into the community as well? 46% of business owners respondents defined recreation and tourism in Lagos Island as time to relax. 27% of respondents identified recreational spaces like campus, memorial, mini stadium as their primary recreational space. So again, how many spaces do we have in communities? We do need to expand this. It can't just be one for a population of, let's say 3,000 people. 30% business owners had not visited the recreational areas before due to their busy schedule, lack of time, inadequate funds, security concerns, lack of awareness, lack of accessibility to the facilities. And the most visited was Freedom Park. So we have Mr. Theo Lawson here, which I think is great because it says here that most of the people who live in Lagos Island that we interviewed do frequently visit Freedom Park. And then residents seek safe and secure recreational spaces, parks and or playgrounds within close proximity to their homes to contribute to a strong feeling of community and belonging. And then other factors impeding recreation activities include the state of roads, which are not pedestrianized or cyclable and in need of rehabilitation, the lack of effective traffic management, and the level of insecurity within neighborhoods. So again, security is a big issue that came up during our research. Then visitors and business owners are worried about insecurity within the neighborhood, and then recreation activities help to build socially cohesive communities. They amplify trust and boost optimal distribution and use of public resources. Provision of space for recreation activities, affordable and inclusive arts and cultural events will contribute to the valued benefits of social cohesion. So I think those are the main findings. I'm going to stop there because I think it would be really great to hear, to hand over to the panel discussion to hear from the panelists of their own thoughts about how we can really bridge the gap and what the importance of bringing the residents into these kind of decisions when it comes to recreation or tourism decisions. And then maybe towards the end, after the panel, we can talk a little bit more about recommendations. I'm sure some will also come out from the panel discussion as well. So I'll hand back over to Adam.
All right, thank you, Olamide. And so in terms of the format for how we're going to run the panel session, I'll hand over to my panelists and they'll introduce themselves. Most of them don't need introduction, but they will just for formality. And then we'll have a couple of questions that we'll run through for each panelist to answer. And then we will open it up for questions. If you do have questions, you can put them in the chat box and I will, I'll bring them out or ask you to ask them when it's time. When it's time to ask questions as well, please raise your hand. Once you raise your hand, I will also call out to you so you can ask the questions. The idea is that this is a collaborative event. It's going to be interactive. We're going to share, we're going to learn together. And all of this is also going to feed into a press release. And we're going to have dissemination activities so that all the findings and the learnings and also some of your insights that are coming from this will also contribute to the recommendations of how we can shape not just Lagos Island, but other communities that we have across Nigeria. So thank you. Without much ado, I guess I will start with our panelists. So we will start with Ms. Silva. Please, if you would just like to share a couple of words about yourself, a couple of lines about yourself, and particularly some of what you're doing with Glover Memorial Hall as well. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, please unmute. All right, thank you.
We can't hear you.
We can hear you very well.
You have to unmute yourself.
No, she's unmuted, and we did hear before because we had a sound test. Ma, it's gone off. So we'll just, no, something has happened.
Maybe try without the headphones. Might be some.
That's the thing about tech, right? No, we can't.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Fantastic. Yes, we can.
Can you hear me now? Excellent. Okay. Let me remove all these things that are on the, okay, excellent. So, I think it is really important, this report that you have done, the bringing together of all the different players for any community. I'm Joke Silva, as Adu mentioned. I'm an actor, a producer of content for the platforms of the stage, for screen, and for radio. And I'm also looking forward to going back to directing all this content at some point. Right now, my company, Lufodo Productions, is the managing, we manage the space known as Glover Memorial Hall. Glover Memorial Hall is one of these incredible spaces that was built in 1887. And it's then it was brought down in the early 60s, and Cap and Dalberto rebuilt on that same on those same grounds in 1962. So we're in the 1962 version of Glover Memorial Hall. It's a place of culture, heritage, and within a space of enterprise. So a lot of what we're doing right now in Glover Memorial Hall is to get the community aware of the space because of the design, the 1962 design of Glover Memorial Hall. A lot of people don't even know it's there. We're surrounded by financial institutions, Central Bank, Nigerian Stock Exchange, Union Bank, First Bank, and most of them don't realize that there's the newly refurbished Glover Memorial Hall. So what we've done is to get a lot of the school students within the community to hold, the schools within the community to hold their end of year events in the space. So there's that awareness coming, and then we have some of the financial institutions using the space for some of their AGMs and things like that. So it's just right now we're just getting people aware of the space. Long-term plans are we're receiving theater and we're producing space. We also have the cafe is on now, and the restaurant will be up before the end of the year. And there's so many plans, more plans that I will share later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma. We're going alphabetically, so I'll go to Alhaji Abdul Latif Muse, who is also going to share a bit about himself and what he does. Is going to share a bit about himself and the Victoria Island and Ikoyi Residents Association. Thank you, sir.
Okay, well, thank you very much, coordinator. My name is Abdul Latif Muse. My background is banking. When I finished my core in the banking system way back in 1993, I asked myself, what else can I do apart from running around to make money? So I said to myself, let me give back to society some of my experience so we can assist in some way to get people more interested in matters of the community. I had a community newspaper, and that community newspaper led me on to be part of the Victoria Land and Ikoyi Resident Association. The community paper focused, it was called the Mirror, focused on matters of the community, and I think members enjoyed it and brought me in. When they did, progressively I was a trustee of the association. Progressively they now said, look, something was missing. We had an executive director who was coordinating the community involvement in matters of the environment and security. That started for a while, and there was a little problem. So the executive secretary had to leave. So when she left, I said to myself, look, let me take on that assignment as well. So apart from my interest in the community, I have little other things that keep me busy. But essentially, I commit most of my time to matters of the community. And essentially, we focus on how to improve or maintain the common assets, get interested in the concerns of individual members of the community. When they air all of this, the collective strength of the association is used to discuss with government. And I think there's a lot to say when we will be responding to the questions as put up for the panel, so that I don't let it all out, and there will be little less to say when it comes to the question time. It's indeed a great pleasure to be here. And as we speak, I feel personally obliged, and I think some members of the association will feel the same way, because one of the things that we've seen is that the awareness is still yet to get to the right level, not only at the level of the individuals, but also at the level of corporate institutions. Corporate institutions are the beneficiaries of most of what the association, the Victoria Land and Ikoyi Residents Association, is doing, but they are the least cooperative. And I think if we achieve anything at all, is give these matters the publicity it deserves, so that more and more people could come to be part of the effort to make sure that the community is not only protective, but sufficiently cooperative, so that we will have an environment we can be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And then I'll go to Chuka Ehono. Chuka is an architect and is also the convener of the 9H Design Talk series, which brings again architects and designers together to talk and share. And he's also the chairman of the board of trustees of Open House Lagos. So Chuka, I think I introduced you, but you can just share a couple of lines of some of what you're also doing in terms of shaping the spaces that we live in. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, as an architect, obviously, I somehow help to shape the city, rather directly, actually. But I think a lot of architects fail to want to make an impact on the city and fail to want to that can lead to a better city. A single building never really can change a city, but it can open up conversations about that. And I think to a large extent, that's what I feel that I want to do with architecture. I just want to continue to do a little bit and then hope that people see it. I also like to bring architects together, designers together, hence the 9H design talk series and some other things that I've done that are basically to try to bring us all together to have these conversations and discussions. And Open House Lagos, of course, which is yet another area that we can use to develop this idea of coming together to get the city on a better footing. I mean, I always notice that government never really does enough on its own. Not that I'm saying they should do everything, but they actually don't even do their bit, to be honest, in the city being, making the environment a lot better. So I think it's up to us to do it. And it's also up to us to criticize government, which I think doesn't happen enough. I think people are scared of government, which is a pity. And then I've also, as far as residents association sort of thing, just when I was listening to Alhaji, and I just remember that actually I was in the Residents Association of Norman Williams and Alhaji Bashir in Southwest Ikoyi once, and I was actually drafted in by force. So I've never actually done that before and haven't done that after. And it was quite enjoyable actually, because I ended up being the head of traffic. Norman Williams is a thoroughfare. Well, sorry, it started to be used as a thoroughfare for people dodging traffic on Awolowo Road, and also for when petrol queues were very bad on Awolowo Road. So I ended up doing stuff like barriers that certain cars of certain heights could not go through, and then speed brakes on speed bumps and all that, which was also quite fun. Well, apart from that, yeah, I'm just an architect and a product designer, actually, on a serious note. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chuka. And so again, this is alphabetical order. So Dolapo is the next person going to speak. He's the founder of Estate Intel, and he's done quite a lot of work in terms of illuminating and sharing on research and what's happening in real estate development. So Dolapo, do you want to just introduce yourself and share a bit about what you're doing in terms of shaping communities?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Adu. Yes, I lead the team at Estate Intel. Estate Intel is essentially a data platform, a Pan-African data bank, and we track the real estate market in multiple communities in multiple African cities. To start off with, we like looking at cities because cities are unique, and I think they're very important to individual countries' growth. We've spent a lot of time tracking developments, looking at how they impact communities and themselves, but also helping developers figure out what the best thing to do with their land. Many times we find a lot of people who have ideas about what to execute, but that is really very disconnected when you compare, or it's at a disconnect when you think about what that community actually needs from an amenity or a real estate development standpoint. I think this report is obviously a very good initiative. There's a lot of rich culture that has been left behind in Lagos Island, and I think discussions like this and gatherings like this are very important to make sure that that culture is not lost, but also those communities can continue to grow in the future. But yeah, thank you very much for having me, Adu.
Thank you, Dolapo. And finally, and definitely not the least, I have Mr. Theolosin, who is, as we know, the person that is behind Freedom Park, done a lot of work in terms of setting up Freedom Park, and also even continues to do quite a bit in saying, how do we continue to bring our communities together? How do we create spaces for them? And how do we provide relevant, accessible culture and content for them? So Mr. Lawson, do you want to just share a bit before we start? Thank you.
Thank you all. Good morning. My name is Theo Lawson. I'm an architect. And I think I was probably one of the most fortunate, architects, because it's every architect's dream to, get the opportunity to do a dream project like Freedom Park. And essentially, it happened by accident or by providence, because the initial concept was in 1999 when a group of architects got together under the aegis of the CIA, which is called the Creative Intelligence Agency. And we thought we would let's put some ideas forward for Lagos in the future, Lagos of the millennium. Different firms came up with different ideas, and I particularly wanted to build a park. I felt Lagos needed its own space where people could just go and breathe because of the congestion in Lagos Island. And at the time, the old prison seemed the only viable space, because all the buildings had been pulled down since the 70s. And it was just a vagrant center, a center for vagrants and stuff. So looking at this space, doing the research on this space, found out it was historical. It was a prison for 100 years. People like Awolowo, Jakonde, and many others had been incarcerated there. So it went from being just a park to becoming a memorial space where we could celebrate our heroes past. And then how do you make space sustainable? I mean, people come to the park, okay, parks close at night, so it's no longer useful. As a museum, people, once you've been there once, you don't go back. So I thought if I invited the arts community to adopt the space, that would now give it some level of activity, constant activity, evolving activity that would make it sustainable and keep the space going, running independently or self-sustaining. That was fine this was, like I said, the initial idea was 10 years before it was actually manifested. The initial idea went with all the CIA reports to the government at the time, and nothing came out of it until in passing, I was talking with somebody who happened to be a special advisor to Fashola, who passed the synopsis to Fashola. 2 weeks later, I was meeting Fashola to present the idea. And a month after that, I met with the EXCO and they approved the project. So it was where stars align. So like I said, it was every architect's dream where things like that happen. And although it took 10 years in gestation, but essentially it happened at the right time, and it coincided with Nigeria's 50th independence, the commissioning of the space. So everything just seemed to be providence. But since then, Freedom Park has become, it's gone through a lot of phases. When Fashola left, the incoming government had issues with a lot of Fashola projects. And so we had a commissioner who went to shut down the park, cut down the trees, and make it an arena like TBS. So he actually had drawn up plans and everything. He thought the memorial was, the fact that it was a museum was irrelevant. All government was about then was the money, the income. He knew how much money he could generate if he had the bands perform a 10,000-man concert at that arena. So basically, priorities and different governments change. Our government's interests or government's objectives can impact, what everybody thinks might be a good idea. But just having a good government at the right time, or having a good ear listening in at the right time helps. But we survived various administrations where battling our way through the politics of running this space. But I think we were doing quite well before COVID. We're one of the top 5 places to visit if you're in Lagos. And post-COVID, everybody's working from home, so traffic has eased down a bit. And now we're becoming more of a community center. We have always attracted the kids in the area, but now more than ever, the kids come in to avoid issues of gang warfare on the island and also police harassment. But we also have adopted a community of hemp smokers, which we try to manage. But all in all, we are a community service-oriented space. Thank you. I've rambled on a bit too long. We'll talk a bit more about the space and its evolution later. Thank you.
Thank you. And for me, I feel like the panel session has already started because it's important that people know the genesis of things as well as how long these activities take. So one thing that I would say has been very encouraging to us, and Olamide would also support that, is that, you know, when we did the survey, when we went to the residents associations in Lagos Island, when we went to the Afro-Brazilian communities, when we invited them for the focus group, it's just to see that even in their own little, in everyone's little corner, people are trying to make a difference. And similarly for this public launch event, when we said, oh goodness, who can we call? Who do we call? All of our panelists are busy, they're traveling, schedules, etc., but they all committed to saying we'll make time for this today. And just understanding the effort, the time that change, social change takes, right? It's something that I feel like can inspire us so that we know that it's not a journey of one day, it's not a journey of 2 days, it's really a journey of several years. But it's a responsibility and like was shared, it's also a responsibility and a way to be part of a community, to be part of that change in whatever way that we can. What we are seeing and what we have seen though is that for us to derive impact, right, it's really when we start to aggregate and when we start to work with others and when we start to collaborate. And so I want to say that everyone here has a tale of, you know, struggle and pushing things uphill, but it's that sense of resilience and perseverance that I would say has also that helped them to stand the test of time. Right, so I guess we'll just start with some questions. Again, like I said, if you do have questions, you can raise your hand or you can put it in the chat box and I'll call on it later. But I'll start with Alhaji Muse, please. You know, can you just share with us, you know, why residents associations are important to building more cohesive communities? And I asked that question because I remember when I was young, you know, I grew up in Surulere and we had residents associations on our streets, but over the years, it seems like everyone has just gotten busier, and the resident associations are there, but they're not seen as powerfully as they used to be before. And Chuka also referred to that a bit in his own opening statement. So Alhaji, please, could you share the importance of residents associations for cohesive communities? Thank you. This one, Alhaji Muse, are you there? Okay, maybe I don't know what's happening. So what I'll do is I'll just go to Ms. Silva.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Right. So what I was trying to say was that the cohesiveness of society or a community is a function of the realization by all the components, especially the individuals in the community. Individuals not limited to the person, the organic person, but also businesses, those who have interest in the community, either they live there or they do business there. One of the issues is that they should understand that they share some common assets in terms of the roads, the drainage system. They have, in addition, natural facilities, the lagoon, the oceans, the ecosystem, the trees, quite a number of other things that they share in common, the transportation system to bring it home. All of this require to be protected And the government, which is saddled with the responsibility of giving us some good life, by definition, is not in the position to do as much as we all desire. Therefore, the community has to have a medium to reach out to the government and let them know that there are limitations here and there. Where they don't reach out to government, they could also do some of these things to complement government effort. The association, the Victoria Island and Ikoyi Residents Association, as we knew it originally, was focused on just communicating with government. There are exceptions here, there are exceptions there. Until some 12, 13 years back, when a committee of self-regulation was formed by the association. That committee transformed into what we now call a formal trust, Victoria Land and Ikoyi Security and Environment Trust. Now, the focus of the committee was to ensure that members themselves did what was right. They didn't want street trading, for example, but they had malams all over their houses, selling little things here and there, and attracting patronage of all manner of people. That exposed the environment to some threats of security, because people are moving, looking at houses, and once they look and get enough information, they do, or they did strike. So the association then formed this committee, which began to take steps to let the community know that this is wrong, that is wrong, that should not be done. The law says this, the law says that. It's not everything that we have to take to government before we can resolve. That was the first phase of the Committee on Self-Regulation, which transformed to Security, Victoria Island and Ikoyi Security and Environment Trust. So a lot of effort was made by the initial committee members to ensure that even where it was necessary, traders could be chased, all these with the cooperation of government. At that time too, the association, the committee of the association, which transformed, like I said, had a police detachment, so to say. We also had a magistrate court, which could deal with whatever problems, whoever was not obeying regulation in time. So the community has a task to protect itself. It's not everything government. Like I said, community associations represent also platform where ideas about what is right for our environment, which we share, because the community has a lot of resources in there that is latent. There are ex this, ex that in every community. There are ex-ministers, ex-governors, ex-whatever, ex-bank executives, name it. So all of this class of people, they have to pull together and represent the repertoire of information which they will share within the community and to government when it is necessary. So community positions about fiscal development are also easy to reach out to government with once we have a resident or a community association. So community associations serve a lot of purposes, and once these are opened up to those who benefit, I think it becomes easy for everyone to see that this is an important platform which everybody should avail itself of its uses. There's so much more to say, but I think we can live with this for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And I'll come back to you. And I want to say that part of how I got introduced to Alhaji Muse was I used to live in Victoria Island, and we had a noise pollution issue, and it was really calming. And it was very good to see that there was a body of residents associations that were actually working with the different environment agencies to see how we can address noise pollution, and also how we could address noise pollution in terms of noise, right? Loudspeakers and parties, etc. And just again, that sense of, like he said, there's so much resource that's available, but you don't need to know everybody. If you can literally just plug into your residents association, then that connects you to a much wider network that can also enable you to live more harmoniously. And I would say that, because again, one thing that has happened over time is this erosion of this sense of community. So, you drive around even places like Ikoyi, and everyone's compounds are beautiful and pristine. But then when it comes to the communal areas, where it comes to the common spaces, you see that some of these things are not being thought through. And it's that disconnect between what is mine, what is ours, who's responsible for what, is some of the conversation that we need to have. But I'm going to come to Ms. Silva now. And before I come to you, Ma, I just wanted to just cast a glance back on some of the work we've also done, which was being part of the Lagos State COVID Committee for the creative industries in terms of support and palliatives. And part of that work was also and showing people that, the creative industries are so diverse, there's so many subsectors, but also that they have such a responsibility and are doing so much in creating this sense of, what it means to be Nigerian, what it means to be Lagosian, and the role that the government has in supporting and facilitating that. And the reason I mentioned that is it brings us to this question now about, from your experience and, your very strongly well-established career, how would you see the creative industries, contributing to, urban development and urban planning? What do you think we should focus on if we wanted to start that journey? Thank you.
Okay. I'm unmuted now, yes? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, excellent. So, thank you for this question. I mean, one could discuss that for well over an hour, but I'd like to focus on a couple of things that I think are very important for the creative industries, to be able to contribute and contribute significantly to urban development. One of the things that Theo mentioned, which I think is very key for all of us that are running spaces within the Lagos Island community, is the fact that you said it in your report that a lot of the dwellers in the community are of low income people, although you have a lot of businesses, a lot of corporate organizations within Lagos Island. So what that means is that one needs to have quite a lot of events that may be beyond the reach of the members of the community. And a lot of people who are in the corporate organizations are visitors to the community. They come from different parts of Lagos, of the state, to work within the community. And so what I would then like to suggest, it's something that we do that is done for the agro industries, which is the fact that you have this almost like a no interest loan, which is I guess almost like a grant, but it's a grant for about 30 years because the gestation period for the agribusiness is it's not a thing of 5 years, so they have this agro loan that's for about 30 years, and then the option to buy after 30 years. Now, what does that do for people like myself and Theo, for instance, so that you don't have that rubbish that you're getting from a lot of, when there's a change of government and then the next government that comes into place decides that they want to turn a public space into a hotel. they want to turn public space, something that is a joint heritage of the community. You now want to turn into, something else. And that's what a grant like that would guard against. So that, that is one of my recommendations, that we have concessions shouldn't be should be for a longer period. Like I said, for about 30 years, something that will make sure that the place gets established. And also the fact that the kind of funding that you then get, you are able to create work that people can come and, people within the community can come and see good quality work. For us in Glover Memorial Hall, for instance, we, like I said earlier, we are a receiving theatre, but we have to be a producing theatre as well, because of the nature of the kind of structure that the government has done in Glover Memorial Hall. It's actually very highly cost intensive, so running that space is, I cannot, most of the creators of content can't afford that space. So I need to create a lot of content so that people can, so that there's enough going on in the space. And then we can also support creators of content as well. So like I said, that's one of my recommendations. Now, another thing that I'd like to suggest is that when we, for us in Lagos Island, for instance, now I know what Alhaji was saying, that they don't want any street trading, but for us in Lagos Island is hang in the middle of enterprise, where we are, Glover Memorial Hall. When I was working in the Glover Memorial Hall in the mid-90s, there was a lady there who was selling, we used to buy Coke from her. She was like to the left of us. Then opposite us, there was another lady where we were buying bananas and, we just used to buy all our snacks from her. I get there early this year when I take over the concession, the management of Glover Memorial Hall. The daughters are the ones that have taken over the business. So it's now a historical space for them. I cannot dislodge them. Yes, it's untidy. All right. So one of the things that we're working on, unfortunately, I tried to get a picture of something that we've done on our street, is to do some kind of public art in which they fit in. One of the things that we've done so far is that there's a Wema board building that we're using that we're partnering with for our parking space. And it was just so dingy to look at. It was disgusting. And what we did was to get a young person to do some murals on that space, and it totally transformed it. And and the way she did it was that she had a lot of inspirational words on the public art that she did. And so we are finding that people are now coming just to get use that particular spot as part of their music video, And it just lifted the surroundings. And so that's what we want to do with some of the street traders. Not many of them, and there are not many on that street, but the ones that are there, we want to include them in the street public art that we do for the streets. And we're in conversations with all the financial houses that surround us to help us bring that to play, so that they are integrated into that public art. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Ma. And one of our findings, during the research was that some residents found out that a lot of the interventions did not include them either in terms of accessing the spaces, but also in terms of enjoying some of the benefits for their livelihoods from the spaces. So I'm quite glad that you touched some of this, because it's that sense of engagement, both as residents for leisure, but also for them for economic benefit as well, because that also then makes them feel integrated. They feel as they become custodians of it almost, and also promoters of it. And inclusivity, exactly, and inclusivity is considering all of these different layers and ensuring that we think about it. Chuka, I want to come to you first before I go back to Mr. Lawson, because you spoke about designing spaces, and I don't want to really talk about what I think about the wave of architectural design in Lagos right now, but we can discuss that at another forum. But what I really wanted you to share a bit more is how can we really design better? How do we design better so that residents and people that live, right, have more, a better quality of life, a better sense of connection? And Dolapo, I'll still come to you, but look at estates now, for example, and you look at buildings, right? And you look at even communities, and it just seems like silos, like we're just building silos for people to live in. So what is guiding this? What are the regulations? What are the formula? What should we know about these things? Thank you.
I think there are two books that I read sometime in the early 80s that I've just never forgotten, what they tried to teach. One was The Living City by Frank Lloyd Wright, and the other was Collage City, written by Colin Rowe. And the two are connected. Frank Lloyd Wright basically was asking for a city that grew organically, that kind of tried to join agriculture and the city at the same time, and the idea of a green city. And if you look at the title of that book, which was Living City, you would know that basically, the word living is very, very important there. And it's sort of like an animal that breathes or a plant that's alive. And in Collage City, Colin Rowe talked about the idea of a city being a collage of various layers of things, sometimes totally unrelated, sometimes found objects. So that becomes like bricolage, which is basically about finding things and using them as your collage items. And I love the idea because there was something that Ajoke Silva just talked about, somebody who had been selling outside Global Memorial, and it's been going through generations. I was actually very, very happy to hear that, because for one, I'm against the indiscriminate removal of kiosks as they're situated willy-nilly around the city. I know it's not good. We can get to that later, not today. But I'm against people being packed off from where their kiosks are. I'm against stopping people who are selling in traffic rather than finding out how to deal with it in a way that can create, there can be an environment, a lay-by where you can park your car and drive back in, like a drive-by, really, with lots of Igbo boys selling Fanta and Coke to you, I mean, they're just things that we're not doing. And that's why our cities never work, because we think we can manufacture a city from scratch that is actually alien to us as well, rather than look at what we are. Maybe it's caused by some poverty is part of what causes the whole street hawking and all that. But that said, we're not going to be rich soon. It's not going to happen soon. Actually, it's going to take a lot longer than we thought, because we've messed up the first 60 years. So I think it's time we started to see the city as something that we could bring together all sorts of things, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that's where the collage city comes in, that idea of the collage city. And that's, for me, what I think we're doing wrong. We don't need, when they say things like Eco-Atlantic is going to be the new Dubai, and I'm like, I wish we could burn the whole place down, because we don't need any Dubai in Lagos. Dubai isn't even nice anyway, but let's leave that as well for another day. Lagos is rich. It's actually a very beautiful place. It's not working, but it's very beautiful. And that's what we have to recognize in moving forward. We have to recognize it even when we are trying to create expensive areas. Expensive areas means Victoria Island, Ikoyi, and all that. And now even there's no difference between, say, Ikoyi is not even any different from Ilukbeju today, let's be honest. I mean, come on. So I don't really know where the land values are holding from. And the ones in Ilukbeju are not, because, really, this whole thing is it's not going very well. So I think that the basic things we need in a city, the green spaces, and we need lots of them. We don't need big ones. I think there was a talk. I don't know who held that talk. Maybe it was University of Lagos on Zoom some time ago. And there was this Indian lady who spoke. And she was talking about little green spaces, not a central park that's big. We don't need that. We just need lots and lots of little spaces. We went to an estate on Saturday, Orange Island. I mean, the layout is nice, but I still criticize it because it's really all about massing up those houses or plots of land, as the case may be. What we need are little parks here and there that everybody can walk to in 3 minutes. And it doesn't have to be big. It's not even a park, actually. Sorry, I misused the word. Just a green space close to 20 houses. And then another 20 houses, you open up another space there. And you just keep doing it. The area will grow, And one last thing, sorry. If you look at this multiple green spaces, you will see what the problem is with a place like Victoria Garden City, where they went and did a very big park, tricked everyone into thinking that this was going to be a garden city. They don't realize that some of us absolutely understand the concept of garden city from the early 20th century. What it turned out was that after they did that park, they just started to do phase 1, phase 2, and they just kept packing lots and lots of houses. Now I can't even walk. Sorry, I don't live there. Now people can't walk from certain houses to that park. It might as well be an alien place that they only see on the way into the estate, and they never use it. And so they live in the concrete jungle. But it's called Victoria Garden City, by the way, which is completely ironic, let me stop there.
Thanks, Chuka. Olamide has put that it's called a parklet. So what you were mentioning, I just would like to say that the views of our panelists are their views and not the representation of the Sahara Center. But no, Chuka, thank you so much for those comments. I mean, I'm not even going to talk about Parkview or any of these estates that we're building. But Olakwa, this neatly fits into you and what you're doing with Estate Intel, right? Because we have estates and there's a lot of real estate development going on. And this conversation can't talk about value, etc., because it's beyond our remit. But I just want to know that, what are your thoughts on how our estates really are collections of buildings as opposed to spaces for even the residents of the estates to meet, to get to know each other, to socialize, to have recreational activities and leisure activities. We're having a lot of high-rise flats. We have townhouses. We don't even have parklets. You have estates that are not planned. They don't even have walkways for pedestrians. So how do we change this narrative? And how can we bring developers to work with local communities to better design these estates so that the value, right? And I guess that's what Chuka was talking about when he brought in Ikoyi versus Ilukbeju juxtaposition. How do we look at value, value and valuation, and what can we do about that? So I feel like I'm giving you like a lot of questions, and I know you're not representing all the real estate developers, but I would like to hear some of your thoughts. Thank you. And sorry, before you go, I just want to say, I put in the links to the books that Chuka has mentioned in the chat box, and we're going to order it at Sahara Center, and I guess we'll order it with Ludi, and so it will also be available if people want to come and read, they can also come and read these books, because it's important that we also have material to refer to. Dolakwa, over to you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. I mean, I think to start off with, we are not property developers, we are researchers. But I think, it's an important question, and it's a question that we get as well, the way these estates, the way these projects are being designed, and are they really incorporating the additional amenities that people require to live just to live a decent life, things like the parks and the like the Chuka had mentioned. I think the first thing that we need to look at is actually the regulators and the alignment from there. the regulators being the people who are doing the planning authorities, and the people that are able to enforce that. Because if we try and hold just the developers accountable, they're only going to be doing so if it's a nice to have. So developers inherently are making property to make a profit. So they're putting together projects, they're putting together housing units and trying to maximize the amount of money they make. I mean, there's really no, it's that it can be put in as black and white as that. I think developers, and there are a few that are able to incorporate some nice green spaces and think about circulation, think about additional amenities, often do so just because they think this is the right thing to do. But I think that isn't the way we can't really expect everybody to operate in that manner. And the way this typically works in more organized systems is that there is sufficient regulation and sufficient enforcement. So if we're saying that, okay, if you have a plot of land, you need to make sure that you're not designing, you are keeping X% for green spaces, and for every number of housing units you need to make sure that there's a parklet. If a developer has a piece of land, he's going to try and maximize it. And if he can sell it and people are actually going to buy, the residents are going to be fine with it. In his objective of making profit, that will be met. Some are not going to go that route, but we need to understand that we need to understand what the property developer's objective is. Now, I'm not saying or justifying that is 100% fine, and it would be nice if many of them can start to incorporate some of the things that we're discussing. I think that is very important for quality of life, especially as the city becomes more and more congested. But I think we really need to get more regulatory guidance and enforcement, because that is what can scale. I think if we have these discussions and we're able to get a few developers on board to think about how to incorporate some additional amenities that can improve the quality of life, I think that's fine. But if we really want to scale and have like a city-wide, community-wide impact, we really need to start figuring out how the regulators can sit up and stand properly, account for these things that are required, and then also enforce it. Not enforcing it with a brown envelope on the side so that, okay, well, you don't have to put park here, you just pay me and I'll make the planning people go away so you can put more housing units and make more money. We need to make sure that they're enforced, because that's really the only way that it can scale. We can't really depend on the moral compass or the expectation that developers would also just want to do the right thing. Because as I mentioned, what they are after in developing a property is to make as much money as possible. And if they're able to make the money and sell the properties without doing some of the additional things, then most of them might end up going that route. So I think what we really need to do is focus on the regulators and the enforcement, and then we'll be able to see the change that can really scale. I think that is probably the really important thing.
Thank you, Dolapo, for this. And just to say, I would say, because I'm the moderator, I think that organizations, like all our organizations, including Estate Intel, perhaps we also have a responsibility to start to identify these are the things that are needed when you're thinking about an estate. This is what you also need to do. Yes, because I feel like even the architects, the real estate, it's almost that sense of how are they going to know, who's going to tell them? And we all to be part of that conversation. You know, I got some interesting feedback from some people, some attendees while we were engaging in this event, organizing this event, and they were like, okay, you know what, we live in Osaka, Lekki, we have some of this, we live in Elf Estate, we have some of these provisions. And so it's nice that some of it exists. So it's not like it doesn't exist at all. But what you have is that it has to not just be at the discretion of the person, it has to almost be normal, right? Just like a house has windows, you know, we should also have estates that have spaces for residents to connect with, because that's also how they can have strong forces, like Alhaji Musi was saying. Thanks, Dolapo. Okay, Mr. Lawson, I'm going to come to you, just because I think that from what we've said now, you know, there's one part for the residents, but there's also something else for the visitors. And you've explained some of the challenges in terms of, you know, administration, and Ms. Silva has preferred some sort of suggestion of how some of that can be dealt with in terms of long-term concessions, but it's also about ensuring that these concessions are enforced. But for us, it's the sense that when we're looking at Lagos Island, many residents spoke about the experiences of swimming pools, love gardens, and that these spaces don't exist anymore. And I know you've shared some of your own challenges and struggles in getting a place like Freedom Park to thrive. But can you share some of the lessons learned so that if you had to do this again, how do we ensure that we can also transform other spaces? Because the idea again is to have other spaces that, and I think Olamide will share more about the distance that needs to be from one. Olamide, actually, could you share what is the distance that residents should have from one public space to their houses? I think you mentioned this at the press release. I can't remember.
Actually, I have no idea. I don't know about public space. I think Chuka mentioned 3 minutes. I think 3 minutes is a good distance, actually. But I know, for example, I don't know if necessarily for public space, but for walking, you shouldn't have to walk more than, you shouldn't have to walk more than 10, I think it's 10 minutes to be able to get public transport. And again, if that's fine for an able-bodied person. But for example, if you have some kind of a disability, or there's another issue, you're a bit older, even 10 minutes may be even too long for public transport. So we've got to link all of these things together. And even thinking about public spaces, I don't want to delve into it too much, but everything about public spaces.
On your video, we can't see you, but
sorry, because I wasn't on the panel, I turned my video off. I'm so sorry. Even thinking about public spaces, we also have to think about, is it inclusive? And to ensure that the public space is something that everybody can use. I mean, we've done a lot of work on not public space as in parks, but public space as in road design, and to ensure that people can use those spaces. And Ms. Joke-Silva also mentioned the fact of the traders, and how do we make sure that we design for the traders instead of thinking of them as an afterthought, or thinking of them as someone that's intruding into like walking space. Well, how do we include them? Because as Mr. Chuka also mentioned, it's something that we are used to and we live with. We enjoy that interaction of buying a banana or buying a Fanta or buying gala or whatever it is. We like that interaction. We're used to it. So how do we make sure we incorporate it into the design of public spaces? But I think some really great points coming out. So I'm really excited to go to the Q&A, but keep going, Ad.
Yes, and just to say that we will go to the Q&A soon, because I know that we've been having some questions. But yes, so 10 minutes, that was it. 10 minutes in terms of being able to access public amenities, but also amenities for residents. You shouldn't have to drive from one place to the other to access something that should be, you should have to be able to walk. And I guess this is a plug for Ludi. They've just had the first car-free day in Lagos, which was on Sunday. And it's all those little events and activities that are going to start to help us to come together and create systems that work both for the creative industries, but for the residents as well as the urban planners. Well, Mr. Lawson, please, over to you. Can you just share some of the lessons you learned from this, such that if you had to do this again, what would you do differently? Thank you for Freedom Park.
Thank you. Actually, during the COVID lockdown, we tried to revive another CIA ensemble. We got together again, and again thought, look, post-COVID, the whole world's changing. Everything's going to change. And we saw immediately after COVID, there was the NSAS protests, which led to the NSAS riots, which somehow everybody thinks is over. I personally believe it's sort of like a quiet before the storm. Things have not changed. Same poverty exists, if not worse. I mean, things are getting quite bad right now. Costs are rising, insecurity is rising. So, but we are going on as if nothing's changed. Okay, let's get back to status quo without addressing those issues of congestion in Lagos Island, unemployment and stuff. So during the COVID lockdown, a group of us got together again and said, okay, look, what can we do to Lagos if all chaos breaks loose? And Lagos cannot, I mean, everything is destroyed. The whole world economy is destroyed because of the COVID situation. Economies have stopped. So what do we do? How do we rebuild Lagos? So I had this idea called the Lagos Spine that relied on old money that dwelt on the Ikoyi axis. Family with old money that It's not Novo Rich. That's, I mean, essentially, if you took an artist from Falamo to, let's say, I took it all the way to Akpongmon. Along that stretch, you have retail, you have cultural spaces, like the Randall, the Onikon area, where you have cultural centers. Awolowo Road, you have retail, down to the commerce on Broad Street and Akpongmon area. So how do we develop these areas in such a way that becomes catalyst to impact everything else around it? So we looked at abandoned buildings, take buildings that have been abandoned, like the Independence Building. At the time, I thought, okay, Independence Building is an iconic building, and one of the problems we had was healthcare. I mean, the COVID pandemic showed the problems with Nigeria, the healthcare in Nigeria and Lagos as a whole. So that could be, I said, if we converted that building into a specialist hospital and made like an iconic center to represent a new way forward, or a new approach to healthcare, develop a specialist hospital where all the floors are taken up by special equipment, consultants, and everything. Okay, that's one project, but lots of projects along the line to essentially recreate or create catalyst projects. There are lots of abandoned buildings. The old nursing school, which has been pulled down right now, we thought of converting to an old people's home, because old people should not be thrown away into the bush somewhere. Thought being on the Koyi axis, the old people could actually go out for walks in the evening and still feel part of the community. And it was a building that was very nice and still very stable, still very strong building. I don't know why they was pulled down, but we heard that powers that be. Other projects, other buildings like the old secretariat, which was supposed to be, which I thought would be a great colonial museum to our colonial history. So we don't forget. A lot of buildings we're losing, a lot of buildings are being pulled down. So we could actually talk about history of Lagos, not just in government, but also in architectural form, in the architectural sense. I was fortunate to be involved in the development of the Tinubu or the Alaya House on Tinubu Square. So that was part of the project as well. But basically, the idea was to look at different buildings along the way, which could become like motivators. And all these things were supposed to be done by direct labor. So this would be creating employment and got everybody involved, whole community involved in it. I thought Lagos Island would also need to be decongested. People right now live about 10 to a room or more. And I thought a building like, what do you call it, the old secretariat, Ikoyi, could be converted into, I wouldn't say tenement. I wouldn't use the word tenement because that would probably be said negatively. But if you develop nice self-contained apartments, room and parlor apartments, or face me and face you, but the grounds would also incorporate things like swimming pools, tennis courts, football fields, or football pitches, where people actually had a sense of community, but it would not become a slum, which a lot of people thought it could become. I used a case study. The building, is it the Pointy Center in Johannesburg, where you have to be employed to take residence in there, and you enter by card. There's a key card access. So if you have not credited your card, you cannot get into the apartment. So if you'd have to be employed, you'd have to have a job, and hence a source of income. Whether you're a bricklayer, you're whatever it is, there must be some income, some form of employment. Minimal income, minimal rent, but you must be responsible. I see a lot of resemblance between Lagos Island and Bahia in Brazil. Even with all the new developments going on, all the terrace buildings along Akpongmon and Bushiri and Co. a coat of paint and some TLC will make that place, I mean, and also probably providing curbs, walkways, public walkways will probably make Lagos Island look distant again, especially with hopefully the congestion of the populace into abandoned buildings, properly redesigned, especially because right now people are working from home. A lot of the office buildings are becoming empty. So maybe it's time to look at those empty buildings or those office buildings and engage architects to redesign them into more useful uses, applications. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for what you've shared. And just in terms of a summary, basically it's a sense of we also almost need to be researchers. We need to look around our spaces, identify places that are perhaps empty, abandoned, and come up with concepts, or work with architects and planners to come up with concepts that can help to work. And this is not like something that's only unique to Nigeria. I remember, or even Lagos Island, King's Cross in London, there was a time that it didn't look like it did. And what had happened was the residents again and private investors had to come together to say, how do we change the face of it? How do we responsibly gentrify this space? Because there's something called, you can look at gentrification in different ways, but how do we improve on it for safety, for security, but in an inclusive manner that gives it an uplift? And it's ensuring that this is done with a nod to preservation, to heritage preservation, but also, like Mr. Lawson said, it's that sense of coming up with solutions as opposed to only identifying problems. But again, it's how do we push together to ensure that these changes can be held. So we need to become researchers. We need to look at simple solutions. Some of it, like I said, can just be about painting. Others can really look at how do we even have more live, work, and play development so that you can live at a certain level, you can work, and you can also play. And those are ways that the buildings can also be transformative. So we'll just quickly go to some questions in the chat box, and I'll pass this on to our panelists because we are still on time, but I think it's important that we allow other questions to be put forward before we conclude and go to the next steps, and Olamide gives us our closing remarks. So some of the questions that we have are looking at what plans do we have to rejuvenate the activities and community engagements, and how do we also have engagement activities, because a while back, carnivals were banned because miscreants took advantage. But in 2020, the Abu Residents Association was able to organize a carnival, but it was called an open house event. So the name was changed, and they did quiz competition, and they also did different things. So the question, and I guess this is to Ms. Silva, is to say, how do we formalize and organize more events for people in our communities? And what I'll do, I'll just go through the questions and then just appoint the different panelists that will respond. And then we'll just respond to this in 1 or 2 minutes so that we can close before 12 o'clock, which is the stated time. So that's question 1, Matt, to you. How do we formalize and organize more some of what you are doing and also engage communities? The second question is, how are corporate entities being courted to actively participate in all of these infrastructure developments? And I think this goes to Alhaji Muse, because you spoke about Victoria Island and residents, and so you can respond to that. And I guess Dolapo as well, you can also respond a bit to that, to talk about what's happening with estate intel and some of what you're also doing in terms of real estate advocacy for the developers, because I know that that's your developers and private investors. Solomon has a question of brown envelope disease. I think that is beyond the remit of this panel. I don't know that we can address that. Shemu has a question on, I want to create a public space that fosters recreation, but I don't live on the island. What should I consider in designing, and what are the regulations to note? I think Chuka can respond to that. And then I can also respond to that, because this isn't really about everyone living on the island. That's not the case. This is just a pilot so that we can learn and replicate. So just to repeat, Ms. Silva, you'll answer the first question on formalizing and organizing so we can do more things in community. Dolapo, please, Alhaji Muse, you will answer in terms of getting corporate entities, some of what has worked. Dolapo, you will share with us what you're doing as estate intel. And then Chuka, you can advise on some of these things to consider in other spaces beyond the island. And then Mr. Lawson, I'll come back to you if we do get any other question. So thank you. Please, 1 minute each, if possible. Thank you.
Yes, hello. about formalizing, I'm not sure that I know exactly how we can formalize, but I mean, I do know that there are quite a few festivals that have been going on. And so I'm not sure that I think that ban has been lifted, especially by the tourism department. But I think Adun can speak more to that about the community engagement, though, getting the community more involved. I'm glad somebody, Theo, also again, Theo mentioned old people. There's a project that we're starting. Hopefully, we should be starting by the end of October, in which we've gotten a grant to run events for over a year for old people, at least twice a week, where they can come to the facility, Glover Memorial Hall, and just work together, play together. I mean, Glover Memorial Hall is a theater. It's like a West End built for purpose theater. And so, creating activities for them, especially old people within the community. That's one of the things that we are working on. And also, of course, like there's about to be a food fiesta again, involving, food from Lagos Island. That's coming up in the next couple of days. So those are all the activities of like I said, we are a receiving theater and also a producing theater. And so a lot of some of the projects that we're doing are projects that especially the early ones, are focused on what Glover Memorial used to be. Glover Memorial used to be the place for political gatherings. Glover Memorial used to be the place, I mean, that was where Herbert Macaulay got his start, was the place where Ogunde did his first performance of Yoruba Ronu, so those kind of things are where there's a kind of artwork being planned for that, and also performances planned around that. I'll stop there. So focusing on things that are relevant to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that, thank you so much, Ma. I think that answers the question beautifully. Really, it's about organizing things that are relevant to community, looking at ensuring it's inclusive. Japan has a very strong example of how they include their elderly residents in participating, sometimes in nursery schools, but also in park cleaning, in public space engagement, so that you provide activities. We can also do things that have intergenerational conversations. How do we learn from the elderly people? How do we learn from them? And just to answer your question, I mean, the comment you mentioned about what I am doing in tourism. So another hat that I wear is tourism. And part of what we're doing when we're doing the Lagos State Master Plan for tourism was saying that it has to be community-based tourism, and the different activities that engage residents, again, visitors, business people, have to look at the community center first, because no one's going to come from international place to a community that they don't feel safe in, that the residents don't look welcoming. You don't want to get somewhere and feel like, oh, you're doing some sort of, there's a disconnect, or some sort of poverty tourism where it's to gaze. Rather, it really should be about engaging and understanding and learning and sharing. So I think that answers that question. Thank you so much, Ma. Alhaji Muse, over to you. Can you share some of what you're doing with the corporates, particularly in VI and Ikoyi, and some of the successes you've been able to achieve, and how more people can work with corporates to ensure that they are part of the community development that they need to also thrive in their businesses? Thank you.
Yeah, I think, thank you. I would start with some of the achievements of the association. Is this big, is huge. At the time, Victoria
we only have 1 minute. Hello? We only have 1 minute, but anyway, please go ahead.
Yeah, I will do that. I'll cut it short. Victoria Island was exposed to the Atlantic. It is the association that took steps, put pressure on government to get something started. Well, as to the form, we were not interested in whether we built a new city or not, but the protection of Victoria Land and the environment was very important, and the association initiated steps to get that into position. Corporate institutions, I think what they require is that we communicate with them, we let it be known that there is value in their participating, because if they do, they will strengthen the association to do a lot more of advocacy for what is missing here and there. Water is missing, the drainage is not flowing. All these will have effect on businesses. But what we've seen thus far is that businesses would rather do some big projects and tag their name to it, and everybody sees that it is XYZ institution that has done this. We need far more than that, and we, the association, should expose the benefits of what they're doing to the corporate institutions and solicit for their support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And Dolapo, could you just share a bit of some of what you're doing in terms of engaging with real estate developers as well?
I mean, in terms of what we're currently doing, when we're speaking with developers who have plans to do projects, we spend a lot of time doing surveys, understanding what the residents want, or not even residents, the target market of the area. So if we're looking at Yaba, for example, where we're speaking to students, we're speaking to young professionals, we're speaking to the businesses within the area and just trying to understand, okay, what is the current gap in the market? Based on that gap, what is the data saying about which sectors are actually performing well? And then we try and marry the two to identify the sectors that actually require the investment in real estate, not just, oh, I want to do a 20-floor building, I want to do a 10-floor building. We are looking at, okay, what's the demand like? What's going to perform well, and what is actually missing in the society or in the community that we can potentially integrate. Excuse the noise. But I mean, just to also add very quickly, I just stepped out of a conference where people are speaking about green building and ESG. And one of the resolutions was that, hey, if other property developers are moving forward with their developments, they are not including any environmental, social, or governance considerations, and they're still selling their properties, what is the incentive for me to spend an additional amount of capital or additional money, and then I'm not getting the same return? I think, like I said, we need to remember that these are property developers, so we need to also make sure that incentives are aligned. There should be rewards for incorporating some of these things, and we should also be educating the end users of the product. So in a community, it's the residents, it's the businesses there, to appreciate and value developers who are not going the aggressive profit route, that are considering these additional amenities that we've spoken about today, so that they can also be appreciated and rewarded by the end consumers. I think until we align those, until we align those incentives, it's going to be a very difficult thing to execute. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dolapo. And again, I want to thank you. Like I said, even Ms. Silva was catching a flight today. He's in a conference, but again, it's about, seeing that they could make the time and be in two places at the same time. So I really respect and appreciate this. Thank you, Dolapo. And Chuka, just quickly to you, right? For people that are coming outside of, and just before I go to Chuka, just to say, Dolapo has provided an update on the abandoned secretariat that Mr. Lawson talked about. So it's in the link, it's in the chat box if you want to refer to it. Chuka, could you just share for Sheon that he wants to foster recreation and create more public spaces or more environment areas for residents to be? And he doesn't live on the island, which I don't think you need to live on the island for that. But what should he consider in designing, and what regulations or what recommendations and guidelines should he note?
Okay, she's actually a she, but
she.
Yes. Yeah, I think there are just 2 points that I was going to make, because this difference between island and mainland is a very big problem, and it's a problem with Nigeria. I think that first of all, in general, we need to tax the rich. We need to really tax them so that we can take that money and go and develop other parts of the country. the disparity between wealth and poverty is way too much, and it shows that something is geared towards only the rich enjoying this country. So we need to do that and start it. No, I don't know who's going to start it, because all those who should start it are rich and they don't want to do it. That would help give us the money for the infrastructure to help the poorer areas. Second is that, well, when you look at the poorer areas today, or the less privileged areas, or however you want to put it, they're quite densely populated, and you're not going to sort of like begin to demolish all their houses right now and all that. So I think what we should do is to try to repurpose the streets. Some streets should be turned to one way, one lane being drive-through, the other lane being pedestrian, and a bit of, like, you can sit on a bench there and watch life go by. It could be green. It doesn't have to be green, by the way. I'm thinking more of paved. I think that we could do stuff like that to begin to, we should intervene in the street, because all they've got is the streets at the moment. They don't have anything else.
Okay, hashtag tax the rich. And I see that Lola has asked, do we need to tax the rich or ensure proper allocation of tax funds into the development of the country? Again, I think that this conversation is beyond the scope of this session, but it's a very interesting thing to think about, because we also need to really start to look at how do we solve certain problems. In other parts, what we have are endowments. So what happens is someone that comes from a community or a place feels responsible to see how they can also change it. And there are endowments that are there to create either a center, a learning center, a community space, etc. I think we need to engage more with this. I'm not going to talk about comments that are being made for Ibadan, because even at Ibadan, people are coming, is this the mainland Ibadan or an island Ibadan? And we're thinking, goodness, let's not bring Lagos to Ibadan here, but that's another conversation. What I want to do before I pass on to Olamide is, Mr. Lawson, I really just would like your own closing remarks, because I know that you've explained a bit on the spine, but for me, it's also that sense of financing and funding. And I know we've spoken about this quite a lot, but can you just share in about 30 seconds, some of how you think that we can also finance and fund this? Because the idea is not for creatives to be the ones to finance and fund, even though that happens quite a bit, and I'm sure Ms. Silva can also share some stories, but we really also need to create a way that either it's corporate or it's residents or it's, like Lola said, it's tax. How do we start to fund some of these things, and what are the ways we can show a proof of concept or proof of, that this is a viable social investment? 30 seconds, please.
Yeah, I think the corporate sector essentially are very lazy right now. They invest in what I say, already made brands. Say, for instance, let me take music industry. People like Wizkid, Davido and co. will continue to get corporate endorsement because they're already made. That's a success story already. So invest in success stories rather than investing in developing new talent, investing in new ideas and incubating new projects. So it really goes down to the corporate empathy right now. We need to wake up the corporates to their responsibility, to actually be have a sense of responsibility towards development rather than profits, not being profit-centered all the time. They'd rather invest, like I said, in already made deals than already made brands than investing in new ones. So I think that's where to start. Government definitely wouldn't do it without satisfying their personal interests. Sorry.
No, there's nothing to be sorry about. Thank you so much, and thank you for that. I guess the conversation is going to be continued, and that's the thing about some of these things. You start one way, and then you realize that there's so much else to do. But again, we just keep moving and moving forward. What I think is important, and some of what we do also with corporates, in another hat that we wear, is that sense of what is a corporate. How are you a citizen? What is your responsibility? And it's beyond CSR. It's beyond boreholes, etc. It's even like Alhaji Moses say, where you operate, where you're head offices are, where your headquarters are, how are you also part of the commons there, and how do you see your responsibility? So I think it can also be something that residents associations can hold them to account, you know, in terms of as a resident or as an operative in this environment, these are certain things you need to do. It can also be like Mr. Lawson said, in terms of looking at investments, not just in established, but seeing how you can also be part of developing those that are up and coming by working with spaces like Glover Memorial Hall, Freedom Park, etc., to create havens for talent development as well, knowing that that will have a ripple effect on livelihoods development, etc. So there's a lot yet to be done, but I think that what we're happy with is that we have started something. So thank you so much to my panelists. Thank you so much for your contributions. Thank you for all of your comments, for sharing your time, for sharing your experience, for sharing your ideas. And what we need now is for everyone to just, you know, give them a round of applause with a reaction on Zoom, which is what I'm doing now. So clapping my hands. Thank you. So Olamide, over to you to share some of the next steps and what we're going to do to close. We said the event will close by 12. I would like us to close before 12. So thank you. And Olamide, thank you for, you know, for everything that you've worked with us on in terms of the partnership. Our participants, thank you. But I guess Olamide will do all of that. But thank you, participants, for also sharing some of the comments as well and questions. So it's been very engaging, very interactive. Olamide, over to you to talk about how we are moving this forward, because the work has only just begun.
Oh, sorry, my internet is very sketchy. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Oh, you can? Okay, maybe my video is a bit slower than my voice, but okay, great. I'm glad you can hear me. So firstly, just say thank you to everybody that has joined and the panelists. Big thank you. I think it's been a great conversation. And I think it's just a conversation starter. Really, this discussion could go on for days rather than just an hour and a half. But I think, and I think the report has highlighted quite a number of things which have also been highlighted in the discussion today. But I just want to make 3 comments. Actually, before the 3 comments, let me talk about next steps. So as Adam mentioned earlier, this is a pilot, and we would love for this to go to different areas, this research to go to different areas of Lagos. So of course, if anybody's interested, and I think some people mentioned, you know, how can we think about public spaces in an area? I can't remember which area was mentioned earlier. So of course, we're interested in looking at other spaces in Lagos and doing this research and really understanding what the residents think and want within their community. So then in terms of my last comments, 3 things. I think government, has been mentioned a number of times, but I want to focus on the local government here. I think local government has a key place within these conversations. Residents associations are even closer to the people, but I think a bridge between residents and, you know, state government officials and federal government officials is the local government. And so we really need to work together with the different levels of government to kind of have more of these discussions and see what we can implement in communities. The second thing I want to say is innovation. We mentioned about creative people, creative institutions, creativity in general, but innovation is very important. We have to start thinking a little bit different than what is the status quo or what we're used to. So I think that's one thing that I would also like to highlight. And then last thing I think Adu also mentioned, I started to talk about, is that we all have a place, we all have something to do within this conversation. Yes, there are estate developers, there are residents, there's safety, security people. Like there is so much we all have, and then there's creative industry. And you know, they're right architects as well. Sorry, I'm trying to remember everybody that's been in the conversation today. But we all have a place to play within this conversation, within the development of Lagos. And we shouldn't feel like, oh, because I'm just a resident, or because you know, I'm only working within this sector, I don't have a place within this conversation. Everybody has a place to play, and everybody's voice should be heard in these kinds of conversations to ensure that we can design a Lagos and build a Lagos that actually takes care of all residents. So that's it from me. Thank you again to the panelists, the people who came online and joined, the participants. Fantastic questions. Thank you for engaging in the conversation as well. And have a lovely rest of the day. And I hope you all heard me because my internet has been very bad.
All right, thank you everyone. And thank you to all the panelists who have shared with us insights from their industry on how
I guess we're saying our goodbye.
planning for recreation, leisure, and tourism can be integrated in our plans going forward. To access the reports, you can log on to our website. I've also shared the link to download the reports from the Sahara Center, but I'll do that again. So to access the report, you can log on to our website and go to our work, and then you see Lagos Island Project. The title of the project is Understanding Residents' Perspective on Recreation, Leisure, and Tourism, the Lagos Island Project. So as we said, this is a pilot study, and we hope that going further, we can extend our branches into other parts of Lagos and other parts of Nigeria. And the plan is for us to become more conscious in creating our development plans to be more inclusive and people-centered, such that we are able to deliberately design spaces for recreation, leisure, and tourism, and not just see it as a passing thing to add in a city's design. We have to be much more conscious and deliberate about it. A final thank you to LUDI, Lagos Urban Development Initiative, to Henrik Ball Foundation, and also to Goethe Institute for their support and their guidance also in the preparation of the report and the project's resources as well. So at this point, we would like to say thank you all to all who have attended the event. And we hope this conversation does not stop here. We have your email addresses. We'll always continue the conversations, and you can always reach out to us through our emails and through our websites and on our social media handles as well. We are open for consultations and engagements and workshops as well. We are a creative sector focused organization, and our drive, we are committed to promoting the creative industry in Nigeria. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Well done.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Yeah, bye, everyone.
I think we should. I need to screenshot the